Hi, welcome back, folks. This is Mike Jones. This is Post-Christian, episode number 3. Here I am back in my make-believe church that's been turned into a house. That's a fictional story, of course. This is a cottage I'm building. I think I'm going to take this outside because there's better lighting. I've got a lot to talk about today, but I'm going to try to keep it concise if I can. In my written blog, I'm talking about truth. Today is supposed to be on a positive note of what we can do about the problem of loss of truth in our society. And I'm going to put a link to my written blog in here because this YouTube channel will get separated. It's a beautiful day here, by the way, spring day, and a little bit of rain, which we needed. Hope I don't get rain on here. About how we get out of this problem that America is in, American society, and the Christian church is in right now. There's a fundamental problem with truth that I've been writing about for almost 20 years. It's sort of funny that a couple of months ago, our pastors had a sermon on truth, and there's lots of people in the church who come to my blog, and of course my wife was there, and people in the church said, "Wow, that's really interesting. She's talking about truth." And even my wife said the same thing. And I felt like screaming, "I've been writing about this for 20 years." And I was glad to hear the pastor talk about truth, the issue of truth. But it tells me that maybe it's my insecurities that somehow I'm not communicating clearly, that this is not getting traction with anyone. And I'm going to keep up. And my motivation for doing the blog, for doing this vlog, it certainly is not, as said before, illusions of grandeur, trying to get attention or trying to get a big following. It's just I have a passion, having been in a very conservative evangelicalism for 28 years, then leaving it and going through a decade of serious study, trying to make sense of the world. I have a real heart for people who are disillusioned with Christianity. And that's the only reason I do it. That's what keeps me awake at night. And it's not about me trying to create a presence online, which I know I'm not. I don't have those gifts, apparently, because I'm not able to communicate. Someone else at church one day said, "I have no clue what you're talking about in your blog." I said, "Really? Is it that bad?" And I keep trying to refine it. I'm redundant. I keep telling the same stories over and over, thinking it would click. It would click. And I don't know. I don't blame the people. I blame myself that I don't have those gifts. But talk about this issue of truth and how we go forward as a society. I won't remember all the things I have in my written blog. I just finished writing it just a few minutes ago. There's several steps. One step is establishing that there is truth. Never before in the history of humankind that I know of, the Dark Ages flirted with the loss of truth, but theirs was more of a loss of reason or devaluing human reason. But never before has truth been questioned the way it is today. I've been writing about this in my blog, so I won't go through it here, of this historical development and what we end up calling postmodernism. My son says it's my straw man, but in a ways I know it is, but it's not simply postmodernism. It's in the age of social media. If there's never been postmodernism, but have the same level of the internet and computers and social media, we may have had the same issue of the loss of truth. So the first step is to establish that there is absolute truth. Now, the postmodernists will say there's not. From Kierkegaard began this process. There's other philosophers that were involved, but I keep this simple, that truth is subjective, that you create truth in your own head. That's simply not true. The classic Greek philosophers would not have said that. Nowhere in the history of the theologians and philosophers in the church would have said that. Certainly Thomas Aquinas, who I look to quite a bit, wouldn't have said that. He said, Thomas Aquinas, speaking of him, said that truth is where our mind and reality are in agreement. Now just think about that for a moment. So I give an example in my blog that there's two rocks on the south pole of Pluto. We had pictures of Pluto a few years ago and got first close-up. Those rocks are a very precise distance from the nearest point between them, a very precise, you could get down sub-millimeter distance. It does not matter if humans ever see those rocks and measure those rocks. There's still that precise distance. Now, they could move, say there's a Pluto quake that shakes them around, moves them, or something else. But at any one given moment in time, they're at a very precise difference. That's absolute truth. And then when it comes to more, I hate to use the word subjective, things like religion or philosophical presuppositions about life, the atheist, the Christian, and the Buddhist, I just picked those three, you could extrapolate to a lot of different religions, are saying profoundly different things. The atheist, there's no creator beyond what we see in nature. There's nothing. It's a closed system. Christians say there's a personal God who created us. In Buddhism, I'm not an expert in Buddhism, but from what I've read, that this world is an illusion, and our job here is to transcend this illusion, to find nirvana, I guess. So, they're very, very different. And the Buddhist would say there's not a personal God, and Christianity says there is a personal God. So I've said many times I can respect the atheist, I can respect the Christian, I can respect the Buddhist in their thinking. They're all logical to a point, but I can't respect those who blend these ideas and say they're all the same. That's what postmodernism is doing, because it doesn't make any sense that the atheist and let's say the atheist and the Christian are saying the same thing. They're not. They can't both. They can't both be true. That there's a personal God and there's no God. But that's where we're at in our society, and it became very clear. I don't want to go off on Donald Trump again, but there's always been lying in politics, but Donald Trump has taken it to a new level. Every word out of the man's mouth, almost every word, is a lie. And back in 2016, he flooded the zone with so many lies that people gave up on truth. And he said, it's just my opinion, that's your opinion, we're equal. Opinions are not equal. So we have to get back to this idea of there is absolute truth. Step one. Step two is putting reason back in its rightful place. This is a new development in the Christian church in America. In the last 50 years, reason has gone out of style. It is now considered contra to faith. God is seen as irrational. But again, I go back to Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, who said that reason is divine, given by God. It's a gift of God. It's glorious. It's what God has given us. This I won't say miracle, but this gift of being able to find truth through reason. Now, I'll make it clear, reason is not perfect, as nothing that humans do are perfect. So it's getting back to that solid foundation that reason is from God, and a good thing. So that's two things. And the other thing I want to address, which I've talked about before, at least conservative Christianity has declared war on science. And I've been writing about that for the last few weeks in my blog. But the reason it has nothing to do with the Bible. They will scream at me when I say this. But I've read the Bible cover to cover. I waited a few years after I left evangelicalism. I want to clear my mind of that culture. I came back and started reading the Bible through a couple of times just with this clear mind of trying to see what it really says. And I was really surprised of how little it did say about the things that Christians make so important. So the things that conflict with science, and there's plenty, but the biggest ones are a heliocentric solar system that Galileo proposed, and he was condemned, almost executed, because it violated church tradition. The age of the earth, 6,000 years old, according to Bishop Usher of Scotland, and this became church tradition. So when they realized that they realized that the earth was much, much older than that, it became a conflict, and it's about culture. And then evolution, the Bible, you have to you know, St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, many of the early church fathers said part of the Bible is to be metaphor and part of it is literal. Now we're living in an age that the conservative church said it has to be literal. Everything has to be literal. So they take the creation story and say it's impossible for evolution to be true. However, when you look into reality, there's enormous amounts of evidence for evolution, even human evolution. There's 6,000 pre-Homo sapien hominoids that they have skeletons for, and some of them are almost complete skeletons, like Homo naledi, Homo erectus, all these. And it's a big question. Okay, you can't say this is all fake, and that's what they do. So when they attack science, saying it's against God when it's really against their culture, and then they don't believe in any science. They don't believe in vaccines anymore. They don't believe in Western medicine, evidence-based medicine anymore. The Christians, conservative Christians, they've declared full war, and we're seeing that playing out in our government right now as I speak. They're defunding science left and right because of Russell Voigt, the 2025 writer and Christian nationalist, has been destroying our funding for science because of that. Thomas Aquinas, and I keep going back to him, said anytime there's a conflict, God has created two Bibles. One is the written scriptures. The other one is reality. And when there's a conflict between reality and the scriptures, then one of them is being misinterpreted. Most likely it's scriptures, just because the nature of a written word is much easier to be misinterpreted than what you actually see with your eyes. I mean, it can happen with your eyes, but when you have overwhelming evidence. And then I was also, another one I was taught throughout my 28 years that homosexuals were the most evil people on earth. And they have to, and we were told this literally, they have to sign a pact with Satan. Otherwise, they could never become a homosexual. So they're pure evil. Well, once you make friends with gay people, and I have quite a few friends who are gay people, you realize that reality is not true. Some of the best people I've ever known. So something's inconsistent with this. And you have to re-examine scriptures. Does it really say that? Anyway, so that was my story on truth. I'm going to recommend this book I'm reading. It's Francis Collins. He was the director of the Human Genome Project and also the director of NIH. It's called, if you couldn't read it, it's called The Road to Wisdom. And he just says the same thing I've been saying. Maybe he gets more respect and people will listen to him much better than they listen to me. So I want to get off on a tangent a little bit. I'm just playing out this video vlog. I may or may not continue it just to see if it gets traction. The first two times the viewership went down, and that's not a reflection on anyone viewing this. I don't want anyone viewing this out of mercy, but it's me trying to reach those who are disillusioned with things that make sense. Is what I'm trying to do. And if I can't reach them, then I won't continue doing this. So I may do 2 or 3 more and just see. I'm not very good at marketing things on YouTube. And I'm not trying to draw in people who don't want to see this. As a matter of fact, I don't want religious people coming to this who want to take a punch at me. And that since 1990, well, probably about 94, 95, I came back into the evangelical church and tried to make a go of it. And it was really hard. I was... Before I left evangelicalism, we were these missionaries to Muslims, and we would walk into an evangelical church, and we were put up on the pedestal, and I liked that. I liked, of course, being looked up on with all this respect and praise. Then in 94, 95, when I came back to evangelical church, and the reason I left was I could not handle the line that was required of us to be evangelicals. I don't mean just me personally. I think it's in the culture, but that's another story. When I came back in 94, 95, I tried so hard. I was elder and deacon and just got slammed and slammed and slammed. Anytime I contradicted misinformation or lies that were being told. And because I want to be a man of truth. There was one church in Stewartville, Minnesota, that gave me some grace. I think the name of the church was Grace, wasn't it? And they allowed me to teach Sunday school. I taught a course on doubt, on Christian doubt, and I taught one on the history of Western civilization, looking at these philosophical impacts. And they seem to be very appreciative. And I got compliments. I think I taught that course twice. And people saying, that's really good, really good. Well, anyway, I come out here to Washington State, and I don't think it's got to do with geography as much as how time has passed and how our culture has changed. But I came here and got involved with the evangelical church, and I was not very well respected there. I tried to teach Sunday school class, and I taught a teenage class, which I really have a heart for, because my kids were all teenagers at the time. Just trying to help them was trying to give them protection from leaving Christianity. Let's talk about the hard things, because you're going to talk about them eventually. Why is there suffering? But one of the first things I talked about, what is essential, what is biblical essential, and what is culture? Well, I got fired, I think, after 2 weeks, and in it's sort of an angry way. I'm a very bad teacher. Parents are upset that I was talking about, we talked about suicide in our very first Sunday school class, because a kid brought it up. So I said, let's just talk about it then. Let's talk about the philosophical reasons for and against suicide, and looking at the Christian reason of meaning, of morals, and not, not that suicide is sin, but, finding meaning in life. What gives you meaning? Anyway, I got fired from that. And eventually that church, I was told I was not even a real Christian, and I had to leave. And then that's upset a lot of people, got very, very angry at me, and I got chewed out in front of my kids in a very bad way. And so I have a lot of scars from this battle. So I'm telling you this story, not for pity, but recently someone has said, it sounds like I don't like the church, or I've turned my back on the church. No. I have not turned my back on the church. The church will not allow me inside and to talk about reality. Just 2 years ago, I tried to re-enter our church again in adult education. I had some mixed feelings because I'd done that before, not at this church, and ran into all these problems, and it just didn't fit. My ideas were all seen as pretty crazy. I'd love to do a course on the Renaissance. I think I talked about this before. But on the other side, I'm not a dogmatist. That they confuse me being a dogmatist. I go to a progressive church, so and I'm going to define these things as we go along. And I'm going to start separating out culture from, I'm going to use the word religious people versus natural Christianity is what I might use for right now. And I don't mean in a derogatory way that religious people are bad people, but in a progressive church, like one Sunday school, I said, let's look at the bare essence of Christianity. What's required to call yourself a Christian? Let's study that. Because the conservative church, they'll have like 500 things you must believe, or you're a horrible human being and you're headed for hell. All my friends from college, not all of them, but a few of them, that I just adore. And I can't communicate with them anymore because the first question that they ask me, or one of them does, one of my best friends, is, you still going to a church with a woman pastor? And that's the first question. I'll say, how's your kids? How's the family? Are you still going? I can't believe it. I can't believe you would do that. It's this judgmental thing of these 500 things you must believe. Anyway, so our church is certainly not that way, but I thought we could boil it down to the very simple essence. And that's all that's required. And I said, Jesus Christ lived in history. He left footprints in the dirt in Galilee. He was a real person. That he died and was resurrected. That's all you need to know. And they said, no, that would be divisive. Divisive. But today, if I was doing a vlog on a new fancy spirituality where you can close your eyes and meditate on certain things and have a certain experience, that might be very popular. But these things that have to do with reason, making sense in those things, are not popular. I'm going to close and tell a very hard story, and I don't know how to tell it. I've had a tough week, and it relates to what I'm talking about. I had a really, really good friend who, when I was in the throes of cancer, so this was a extremely good friend, very generous man. I have a lot of respect for him. That's why it's just so difficult. So we were great friends for 2 or 3 years. He's very sensitive. He'd take me on walks and things when I could barely move. And then things were going great until about 2 years ago. And the point I'm trying to make here is not about him. It's about this principle. I mentioned it. Some people were talking about, I was saying bad things about the church, which I am not. But in my blog, I made the statement that I do not like religion and I love philosophy. And both are true. I love philosophy and I defined them. I defined what I meant by, or what philosophy means. It's simply the love of wisdom. Sophia, the same word that's used in Proverbs for wisdom. God wants us to pursue wisdom. And that's what philosophy is, the love of wisdom, the love of truth. And then I also define what I mean by religion. And when you hear me talk about religion going forward, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not accusing anyone of not having an authentic relationship with God the way that people love to accuse me of that. And I don't mean that in any way, but I'm starting to feel a big separation, and I think it could be a good thing, between a cultural Christianity, which I will call religion, and just a very simple personal relationship with the creator of the cosmos. And with Jesus Christ. I don't make sure you know what I mean. And I see religion, I define it as a human-derived institution of rituals and customs and traditions and beliefs that has a sole purpose of enhancing one's feeling of piety. Now, for 28 years, I was involved with these evangelical groups, the Navigators and other groups, and I just remember going to bed every night feeling like God does not love me very much because I failed today. I drove too fast on the freeway. I didn't smile as much as I just, all these things. I lusted after a girl, this in college or something. And, you always felt so nasty because there's this competition to try to look spiritual. And it became worse and worse. But anyway, in this religious world, it's very complex. There's many customs you must believe. The center of those now for evangelicalism is this pro-life stance. I think it's become an idol. It's the hatred, the absolute hatred of homosexuals, gay, transsexuals, the hatred of immigrants, of poor people, of people of color. I'm serious. That's what this religious world has become. Now, I'm not making one clean swipe with a broad brush, that there's different aspects. There's people who really get into the religious part who don't have all these beliefs. But I want to separate that out from just simple Christianity. But back to the story. So about 2 years ago, as I mentioned, I wrote in my blog about that I love philosophy and I don't like religion. And I define religion there, as I have here, as a human-derived institution for enhancing one's feeling of piety. And if you say, that doesn't apply to me, well, it doesn't apply to you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me for 28 years, and I think I'm talking about a lot of people who are in that world. So the next time we got together, this friend was very upset at me and had the notes from my blog, and this is the way I remember it. He might tell it differently, but he did not seem to be interested in me explaining what I meant. He was telling me what I meant, that I hate God, and if I love philosophy, I'm the same as a Nazi, that Nazism is a philosophy. This hit me very, very hard, and it hit me hard because I've had multiple traumatic experiences with pastors and other people who just want to beat the crap out of me for just saying I want the truth. I'm not on the offensive here. I'm always playing defensive. Well, anyway, we try to restore our relationship, but I think from that day forward, my impression is that he I was going to say thought I was the devil. He didn't think I was a Christian or not a very good Christian. So I had to finally put up barriers that we could not talk about Christian things because it always got turned into my failures, and that really troubled me. But anyway, it came to a head this past 2 weeks, again, where he was very upset with me over Christian things, and I finally had said, I can't do this anymore. I can't play this game anymore. So the point I'm telling this story is a very hard loss. If he had been a bad man, a selfish man, evil man, this wouldn't be hard at all. But he's a very good man, but there's no. After 2 years of trying, there's no way to fix this. The point I'm trying to make with all this story is that going forward, I'm going to be separating out culture, and And it is so hard in any culture to speak against the culture. I'm not saying, throwing throwing stones at the culture, but just saying, okay, the culture says this, but I mean, I use this example, 6,000-year-old earth. That's what got me condemned in my previous church for not being a Christian, because I said I don't think it's right to teach our kids that. Okay, that's a cultural thing. Earth is 6,000 years old. So, when I say the earth is, the overwhelming evidence from geology is that the earth is much, much older, billions of years old. And I know this factually. I know there's a lot of younger creationists and I look at their science and it's terrible, just terrible. But anyway, so if I say, the earth is not 6,000 years old, the Bible doesn't say anything about the age of the earth, then it pisses off religious people who want a piece of me. And they're mean. Religion has a way of making nice people mean. You go back and look, most of the wars in the last 2,000 years were fought over religion, seriously. And I don't like it. And when you go back and read Jesus' ministry, you see, man, he didn't like religion either. He threw the religious people out of the temple, just, making money, and, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and, it's all about show. And I'm going to close just as I start to separate these two things, just a simple relationship with Jesus and religion. Religion, here's some of the things that religion does. It tries to get the Ten Commandments put in schools. It tries to get homosexuals banned from housing developments or from jobs. It tries to get the Supreme Court to allow people to pray in the football field. Jesus said, pray in private. This religion is about show. And I'm not talking about my friend now. That friend was just one little example where I used that word, I don't like religion, and got me in deep, deep trouble. I'm not saying that he's like this at all. I hope you don't misunderstand that. Anyway, so going forward, I'm going to be talking more in a very humble way, a very honest way about this division between Christian culture and what I see as a very simple Christianity, what I called in my book, Butterflies and Belfry, a natural Christianity. Speaking of books, I'm working on getting this one about abortion published. I haven't worked too hard on it. I'm waiting right now for an editor. It's going over my query letter. We'll see where that goes. And then I think I am going to write one more nonfiction book. Just call it postchristian, to put my ideas out. And I don't know if it will ever get traction on. Sometimes you have to realize you don't have certain gifts, and I must not have a gift in communication that I have not been able to get that traction. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll probably do this at least one more time and just see how it goes. Thank you for coming.